Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is still doing well. Have I got a bonus upload for you? Before we get into it, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below. The merch is displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook version. They all were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. Finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It doesn't cost you a cent. Click that like button. It takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative and exciting uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon. Please, folks, share this upload. And finally, leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things, they really do help this channel to continue to grow and go, and they definitely matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump into tonight's bonus, shall we? Today's first encounter. Around 1976-77 in Madeira area of Clearfield County. This would have put me at 6 or 7 years old. We lived just above the town of Madeira. It was a very remote, few homes in the area and very wooded. My dad would often patrol with the local officers from the Game Commission. I am pointing this out due to the fact of how he reacted when he saw this thing. He was a big guy, and very little scared him. We often shook our heads when he would go outside at night to scare off a bear with only a pitchfork. He knew wildlife, knew their habits, knew if they were going to be a problem on the farm, etc. On this night, we were awoken by a loud commotion near our front porch. We had outside cats that hung around the porch, and they would scatter when a raccoon or other animal would approach the front of the house. When they scattered, it was quite loud, hence the noise that woke us up. I remember hearing Dad giving his typical angry sigh because he had to get up and see what was out there. He had gone downstairs, the house was quiet. We were all waiting to hear the door shut. Instead, we heard Dad let out a bellow. This all had us running for the stairs. He was standing back from the door, gun in hand, and his face was, well, I guess you would say scared. As I've said, nothing really scared my dad, so seeing him and the look on his face made us all stand there uncertain. Outside, standing in profile, looking right back at us, and no fear. This thing showed no fear at all. In fact, I remember thinking it was angry. It just looked mean. It was canine, certainly not a dog. It looked like a hyena from the front shoulders to the head. The back end was way smaller than the front shoulders and head. I don't remember seeing a tail. The fur was odd, sparse, and shaggy looking. It just didn't look like fur. It's hard to explain. The snout was not long and narrow. It was stubby, but big. The whole body was huge. From its back end to its head, it was almost the width of our porch. This would put it at least 7 foot long. It was huge. It stood looking in at us, then looked out towards the barn, back at us again, then just simply and very slowly walked a few steps. Then it took off. It was so fast, literally, it was like seeing a blur of color, and then it was gone. We all just stood there. Then my mom asked my dad what it was, and my dad yelled for us all to get upstairs. He stayed up all night, never went outside to check the animals, never even opened the door. Oddly enough, we never talked about it. Nobody ever mentioned it again. I wish I had more information to share. I spent most of my life up there in that area, and it's a very unique area for sure. Many things happened up there that were unexplained, and I was glad to move away when I was 33. I do still live in Clearfield area, but no more thick forests. Today's second encounter. Around 3 in the morning, July 14th, 2020, I had my first close cryptid sighting. Now I'm a waste hauler or a trash man. I start my days very early every day, so the majority of my workday takes place in the wee hours of the day. I live in south central Pennsylvania, and I've resided there nearly my whole life. My place of employment is in the college town of Shippensburg. My job sits in the outlying area of Shippensburg. A lot of this area is surrounded by vast farmlands and open fields. Well, this morning I was traveling to start off my route. I turned down one of the many roads surrounded by fields. It's a half-crescent moon, so there's plenty of light to see in the darkness. As I rounded my turn, I saw what looked like a cow lying in the open field, but this field had no fence or wire to keep livestock in. And it was only one. I found this very odd as I'm looking at the broad shoulders of what I thought was a cow. So I broke out my high-powered mag light to brighten up what I was looking at. When my beam hit this animal, it rose up from the ground in a slow, lumbering, and purposeful action. As it came up on all fours, the creature stood about 5 to 6 feet tall at its shoulder blades. Now I'm in my truck, I'm elevated, and I sit about that high from the ground. The creature was about 30 feet from me, and I knew if I stood toe-to-toe with it, its head would be taller than I, and I'm 6 foot. Now, at this moment, the back of this creature is still facing me. It then turned its head into my light, and the lens flared off. Its eyes were a yellow-green color, and eyes facing forward. This was a predatory creature, not a damn cow. At that moment, heat and cold washed over my body, and I really felt genuine terror taking over. I didn't move, sitting in the middle of the road, knowing I'm low on the pecking order of the food chain at this moment. It continues to measure me for what felt like forever, and it suddenly turned its head and tore off faster than I knew. My pathetic guess was about 30 to 40 miles an hour as it darted away. And after all this, the only thing that I could think was it was some kind of giant hyena, the most terrifying real-life creature I've ever witnessed, and it was gone so fast. It's been on my mind all day, and I needed to share this experience. Now I hear about people and their sightings, feeling away, wishing for my experience, and as of this morning, I really wish I didn't get my turn. Not like that. Not feeling so vulnerable. Almost like it was staring at its next meal. I hope there are others that may have seen or heard what I saw. That light can be shed on this topic, especially in my area. I work in that darkness all the time. Now I'm always looking over my shoulder. Today's third encounter. I live in a small town called Penfield in Clearfield County, PA. This encounter happened late July in 2015. I was driving home from work on a Boy Scout road in Penfield. I usually stick to the main roads when driving home, but sometimes taking the back roads to take in the scenery. As I was coming around a bend, I saw a large brownish tan creature crouched on the side of the road. I slowed down to get a better look. That's when it turned its head towards me. It had a large head and yellowish glow to its eyes and a long nose. I couldn't believe what I was looking at. It was eating roadkill, I believe a deer. At this point, I slammed my foot onto the gas pedal and didn't let off the gas until I reached my house. I then jumped out of my car, ran into my house, and locked the doors. Grabbed my rifle from the closet and loaded it. I then went into my basement and took out a silver letter opener that I had gotten after my grandfather passed away. I haven't seen anything since, but I would like to add that about a month prior to this, I was at my local mini-mart getting gas. A game commission officer pulled up to the next pump. Attached to his truck was a trailer, and on that trailer was an elk. A lot of elk have radio collars. When one dies, it's the game commissioner's job to figure out how it died and to take samples. I asked the guy what happened to it. It was a young elk, maybe 2 or 3 years at the most. It looked fine to me, except for the fact that its throat was slit. He told me he had no clue, and when they found it, the collar it had been wearing was about 10 feet away. He said at first he thought it was a bear, as it's the only animal around here large enough to take down a bull elk. But there was no evidence indicating it was a bear. Plus, he told me the cut on its throat was far too clean. After that conversation, I didn't think too much into it until what I saw on that night. I'm a very fact-based person and don't hold any personal beliefs as far as supernatural things are concerned. But since that night, I don't know what to think anymore. I've lived in this town my whole life and spent more time in the woods than any other place. I've seen all the animals around here, and I can tell you this thing was not natural. Today's fourth encounter. This happened to me about 4 weeks ago. I'm a 42-year-old woman of sober mind, and I am not prone to embellishment. I have a 5-pound Chihuahua and 80-pound pit bull that I walk around town every evening. This encounter happened around 8:30, just after dusk. Streetlights were on. There is a town park in Portage that lies on the edge of some woods. I would guess that this park is around 25 acres or so. I walked the dogs through the park and then decided that I wanted to go around the block on the back side of the park. There's a main road that runs alongside the front of the park and a dirt road that runs along the back side. The roads meet at the streetlight. I was on the main road and got within about 25 yards of the streetlight. Then there was this huge figure, about 7 feet tall, I'd estimate. It was standing just back from the light. I could just see its legs. They were hair-covered and bent backward like a dog. I couldn't make out a face or any other detail as it was standing back. Keep in mind, I had my 2 dogs with me, and my pit bull is extremely protective. The first thought I had was, oh crap, that's a big dog. And then it dawned on me what I was seeing. My next thought was, that's a friggin' werewolf. It was rocking side to side like it was waiting for us to get closer. That's when I yanked both leashes and ran toward home. If it were a dog, note that this thing was 7 feet tall, it would have chased me and my dogs like a normal dog would have. It just stood there, pacing from one foot to the other, side to side. It was standing on 2 feet, not on 4. My dogs didn't seem to sense anything, and there was no reaction from them, which I found very strange. Perhaps that thing was downwind and the dogs didn't see it because this all happened so fast. I got home, told my fiancé what happened, and he didn't make fun of me. He believed me. He encouraged me not to go that way again. Well, guess what? I went that way the next night because I had convinced myself I was seeing things. This time I took the dirt road that circles the back side of the park just to prove to myself I was wrong. It was not quite dusk, so it was still pretty light out, and the woods are on either side, and there are no homes in this particular area. I got within 150 feet of where I saw this thing, and my Chihuahua starts growling, and all the hair on him was standing up. He started barking and going in circles, looking for whatever he had sensed. No reaction at all from my pet. She is a feisty and not afraid to fight intruders, so this surprised me. About the same time the little dog was freaking out, there was a huge crash in the woods next to us, maybe 10 yards away. This area is very swampy, and there are quite a few large brush and trees. This crash sounded like a tree falling, but like it fell instantly. It was loud, fast, and instant. I ran out of there so damn fast I didn't see anything this time other than my dogs freaking out and the large crash. I did not. I could move that fast. I got home safe and vowed to never take that trail again. Please keep in mind that this trail is very heavily used by cars and people daily. That is what strikes me as so odd to hear or see something like that there. Well, next morning I put my dogs out to pee, and they both freaked out and started to growl, hair standing up and running up and down our fence and sniffing and digging at it. They get excited when they smell something that should not be there, other dogs and such, but this is now how they were behaving. They acted very agitated and almost scared. It truly makes me wonder if something followed us home that night. Needless to say, if I walk in the park, I stay away from the back side. The dogs get agitated when we are on the front side, and they can smell in the general direction. They will growl and whine. I always carry a loaded handgun no matter where I go, but something tells me that that wouldn't help if that thing wanted to meet. So that's my encounter. Every word is true. You can take it for what it's worth. I would be very curious to know if anyone has had anything like this happen in my area. Of all the years that I've lived here and been in the backwood trails, I have never felt fear or saw anything out of the ordinary. Now I'm scared to walk in town. I would much rather be in the woods, and I've actually started walking those trails instead. Today's fifth encounter. My husband and I began sitting around our fire pit at my sister's cabin shortly before dusk in Cumberland County, PA. There was no one else present the entire time. As always, we're both armed. We also had a spotlight and were about 20 feet from the front door of the cabin. We both have been avid outdoors people all our life, many, many hours hunting various wildlife, trapping, fishing, camping, canoeing, and hiking. My husband began playing around and yelling weird sounds to get a reaction out of me because I was nervous for the first time out of all of the times I have been there for some reason. To our surprise, something answered him back from, I want to say, about 100 yards into the woods. With the same sound he made, he stopped and we sat silently looking and listening for what it was. No more joking around. The yells, probably 5 in total, came closer over the course of a few hours, until the last one heard was clearly within 40 yards of us. It was then we decided to go inside. I had been shining the spotlight intermittently throughout the evening into the woods, and thought I would do so one last time as we walked toward the cabin. That's when I saw something for the first time, yellow eyes. It didn't look away or blink, but remained staring back at me from the area the last yell came from. I tried to see its body, but everything else was dark around it. When I said, "I see eyeshine," to my husband, the eyes moved several feet sideways, staring at me the whole time, then disappeared completely. I've spotlighted deer and various animals, and this was not the same. They were at least twice the size of a deer's eyes, and there was no indication it turned its head or walked away, but instead gave the impression of it stepping behind something. Once inside the cabin, we retired for the night, with the bed having been positioned directly under the window that was left open for ventilation. My husband slept undisturbed throughout the night. I, however, heard what sounded like wood chops 6 different times. I clearly heard a loud crack close by also. The next morning, I walked to the area of the last vocalization eyeshine down the path. I found the biggest tree in the area about 5 feet off the path. It was too big to put my arms around. I noticed a clear line from the tree to the path of disturbed leaves, as if something walked to the tree, then returned the same way. None of the other leaves around were disturbed except the line continuing across the path in the opposite direction into thick cover. I also found a freshly broken tree limb approximately 10 inches in diameter and 4 foot long, lying in the path. All of this within a 10 square foot radius. It appeared to have come from a live tree nearby and had been broken off several feet above my head. I had every intention on investigating the scene even more, but frankly lost my wit, which is not like me, and returned to the fire pit to tidy up. I knew all this was abnormal and didn't feel right. That's the most frightening thing that happened. My attention was brought back to the big tree, a real loud sound of something big moving fast towards me from the cover where the line of disturbed leaves were. I saw the foliage moving closer as I ran inside the cabin. I'm sure I couldn't have been but a second or two away from seeing it burst into plain view, which is exactly what I did not want. So, I would like to know this. What mimics people's voices, has large eyes that shine yellow at night, hides behind big trees, makes wood chopping sounds, breaks big limbs off of live trees, and charges at people in broad daylight? Today's sixth encounter. I currently reside in Alatoona, Pennsylvania, and I am sharing this encounter I experienced with a friend of mine in the early mornings of Sunday, March 17th, 2013. This incident is now over 8 years old. I chose not to share this for the longest time due to the unwillingness to expose myself to family and friends to public scrutiny. On the evening in question, a friend and I were returning from a job that I had performed in Williamsburg. My friend was driving. To the best of my recollection, the incident occurred somewhere between 1:30 a.m. to 2 a.m. on the morning of the 17th of March. We were traveling southwest on Route 22 through what is locally known as Geezytown, a rural suburb of Hollidaysburg. As we rounded a little curve in the road, our attention was drawn to our left on the opposite side of the road. Standing squatting in a clearing a few feet off the side of the road was some kind of creature. My friend wasn't driving very fast and slowed a bit as we approached. Our initial view of it was its dorsal side as it was facing away from us. It came into profile as we passed with its right side to us. It struck me immediately that the creature had a combination of both human and canine features. It was squatting down on its legs close to the ground, but doing so in a bipedal fashion. The legs had a stifled joint and a hot characteristic of a canine, not a human leg. It had its front limbs, arms, in the front of it, and I believe it was possibly crouched over something, maybe a smaller animal. The arms were long in proportion to its body. I recall thinking the hands were more like human hands as opposed to paws. Its torso seemed to be somewhat hunched forward. I had the impression at that moment that it could have gone onto fours at any time comfortably. The creature's chest was not broad like a human, but had a pronounced forward angled breastbone like a canine. It gave an impression of great strength, having distinct and well-defined muscular, but was not built on a massive frame. It seemed more thin and sinewy. If it had stood fully erect, I'd estimate the creature would have been close to 7 feet tall. It was covered in fur that was a grayish silver color. The creature seemed unnaturally shiny, although this could have been the reflection of the headlights or the moon. It had pointy, erect canine ears that were somewhat laid back on its head. The head was large and very wolf-like in overall appearance. The muzzle was also very wolf-like. Although the snout wasn't exceptionally elongated, it had canine-like teeth to the best of my recollection. The eyes were an amberish color, but may have been a reddish-glow reflection to them. It had a wolf-like tail. Its head was turned to watch us and tracked us as we passed. It seemed quite aware of our presence. My friend and I continued our stunned silence for what seemed like moments. When the creature was no longer in view, I turned to my friend and asked what we had seen. "We just saw a werewolf," was his exact words. I agree that was pretty much my own assessment. I asked if we could turn the car around, but he absolutely refused to. We spent the rest of the trip debating as to whether it could have been a dog or even someone's escaped pet wolf, but, to be honest, it was not. I'm sure of that. Both my friend and I are experienced outdoorsmen, and neither one of us had ever seen anything fitting the description like that before. I was actually raised not far from that area and know it quite well. I've spoken to my friend about this, and either one of us would be willing to take a polygraph concerning the incident. Today's seventh encounter. So for the past few months, I noticed that when I go outside at night with my dogs, I feel something weird at times. Within the past year, we moved from northern Utah to southern Utah. We got 2 acres of property and a few historical buildings for a really, really good buy. We love this house. It was built in the 20s with shiplap, and it's very strong and beautiful. In the back is 4 buildings, and our backyard is kind of sectioned off into 4 areas, with there being a gravel road that goes all the way around the back, and a small path that goes up the middle, all the way back to the property. In town, there's hardly any trees or forests at all, so that's why I'm questioning this, because how could a dogman or any cryptid live here for that matter? There is a state park by us and 3 or 4 lakes, plus a very rocky place, pretty similar to the Grand Canyon. Rivers also run all around this city without us knowing about it, with multiple fishing areas. One day I'm out with my golden doodle, and I'm sitting on the steps of my back porch while she's going pee. She's not acting weird, but I'm getting a very weird feeling that I'm being watched, even through a super tall fence that we have. Suddenly something clicked on me that I was in danger, and remember saying, "Nope, nope, not dying today," before I ran inside without even knowing what it was that scared me so bad. I didn't see or hear anything besides a few weird noises that I assumed were the neighbor lady's cats coming by. She had a lot of cats, and they like to hang out in our yard and the field next to us. A month or so ago, I was sitting outside at night with my golden doodle again, and this time I was sitting in a chair staring at the stars, pretty opposite of the area I was before. Suddenly, I see something larger than the neighbor lady's truck in her backyard run from somewhere by her house, past her truck, and to the sheds. I couldn't see it too well, it's dark, but we do live on Main Street, and the streetlights are super bright, so I most definitely saw a tall black blob. Not too long after that, a whole bunch of people came out of the neighborhood lady's house with either their phones or flashlights, I couldn't tell, and they were shining them all over the yard as if they were looking for something. Today my grandma came in with chunks of hair that had meat on it. The meat had huge slashes in it, and the hair was very coarse, almost something like a Halloween costume. Some were black, and some were a mix of white and brown. She said she had found it by the apple trees and raspberry bushes that we had recently planted in the backyard. We went out today to plant tomatoes, onions, carrots, and other things of that sort in the same area, and found more hair with meat on it. I've noticed the hair around the yard before, but I assumed it was cotton, since we have had that in our yard since spring began. I don't know what this could be, but it's super, super weird. Today's final encounters. An old friend and I had an experience with a dogman in Quebec, Canada. It was the summer of 2008. During a late-night evening hike with a friend in the park at around 9 or 10 p.m., we began to be followed by an animal who acted very weird, emanating a dog-like sound. When we returned to the entrance of the park, this thing cleverly followed us at the edge of the woods to avoid the light at the entrance of the park so we couldn't see it. Like it knew we can't see anything at night, and the light would reveal it. When we were running back to the parking area, my friend and I entered the car in a hurry. When he started the car, my friend saw the face of this beast 2 to 3 meters from the window, standing on 2 feet, staring at him with a creepy grin. My friend's a very tough guy normally, and he knows the forest very well. He's seen lots of predators in the past. This was the first time I saw him terrified like that. A A couple of days ago, his father saw a muscular and massive black dog in Leary, a small town north of Chateauguay, around their little cabin in the woods close to the marsh. The creature had large shoulders, and it confronted the father of my friend by staring at him from a distance of 5 to 6 meters. The moment the father of my friend tried to reach for a kind of spear-like weapon to confront it, the creature ran away into the marsh very fast and never came back. His father never told us about this story until we talked about our encounter, so maybe it was the same creature living in the area, or another one living in the same area. We'll truly never know. One of my uncles has a farm 3 kilometers north of the border with New York State and Quebec. My dad and I were chopping wood for the following winter. We were at the edge of the pasture where the wooded area started. It must have been a little after lunch when my uncle stopped by to speak to my dad. He said that one of his calves was missing and he couldn't find it, so we stopped what we were doing to help him find the missing animal. I was happy to get a break because my dad had the habit of pushing me hard, and I hated not being allowed to play with my friends during the weekend. Anyway, I darted off in the woods, heading south through the thicket. I was running, ducking down, jumping through branches, and having a good time. I must have run 2 to 3 minutes at the most. Then, as I'm running, I hear a low, gurgling growl. I put on the brakes. It's hard to put into words. This thing moved sideways from behind the thick brush. I could make out half its face. It looked like it was on all fours. It was very large. I was standing up, and it was as high as I was, maybe 1.2 meters off the ground. It looked like a black wolf with very pointed ears on the top of its head. I only made out its shoulder and left arm. I didn't see if it had hands. Because of the grass, brush was high. Its forearm was not proportioned right. It was far too long. I just froze and felt my heart was going to pop out of my mouth. I saw a grin from half of its face that I could see. I must have stood there for 5 seconds or so, but that was the longest 5 seconds of my life. I turned around without thinking and ran as fast as I could. I got back to the pasture looking for my dad and uncle. When they finally got back, I tried telling them what happened, but they just said I saw a big coyote. I've never seen a coyote or any dog smile like this before in my life, or something that big. A week later, my dad tells me that one of my uncle's employees found the calf dead, cut in pieces not far from where I saw the huge canine. I still have nightmares to this day. What an absolute horrifying bonus upload. That last encounter, my goodness. Guys, thank you for supporting this channel. Your support is what makes this channel special. Without your support, this channel would be, honestly, nothing. So, you are the channel. I'm just a guy talking through a mic. With that being said, stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant. Please keep an eye on your family, your friends. Stay safe, and God bless you all.